Well, Governor Branstad never met a poor person he didn't like. No, didn't dislike. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to talk about Senator Harkin's retirement and what that does to shuffle the deck. And we're going to talk with Ron Yarnell about something called reverse totalitarianism. Be back in a minute to kick this show off.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Ed Fallon here, folks. Gateway Market and Cafe is your locally owned source for specialty groceries. Enjoy chef-crafted, prepared foods, artisan baked goods, organic produce, specialty cheeses, and hand-selected wines and craft beer. Visit the lively cafe for breakfast, lunch, or dinner 7 days a week. Gateway Market is centrally located on the corner of Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway and Woodland Ave. Stop by or visit www.gatewaymarket.com for more details. That's Gateway Market, folks. Good food, great community.
Hello, Mid-American Energy.
I'm very concerned that you want to bill me an extra $5,000 to build a nuclear reactor. Do you know we're in the middle of a recession?
Oh, we were hoping you wouldn't hear about that until after the legislature had taken action.
Why not let your shareholders pick up the tab?
Oh, way too risky for our shareholders. We need you, our loyal customers, to pay for it.
Wait, let me see if I understand this. Mid-American wants to build a nuclear power plant in 10 or 20 years, and they want me to pay for it now?
That's right.
Well, I'll just take my business elsewhere.
Sorry, we're a monopoly. What we say goes.
I've heard nuclear power is more expensive than other sources.
Yes it is.
And I've heard there's no plan for how to dispose of nuclear waste.
We're looking at shooting it into the sun.
Well, I'm not going to sit back and let you make bad decisions with my money.
We're betting you will.
Stop Mid-American's power grab. Call your legislators today. 281-3371. 281-3371.
Paid for by Physicians for Social Responsibility.
Located in the heart of Beaverdale, Tally's offers speedy and affordable rooftop lunch, catering for events both large and small, innovative cuisine, as well as vegetarian and gluten-free menus. Come to Tally's for live music, dry-aged steaks, Sunday brunch, and all-you-can-eat ribs every Monday night. Tally's Restaurant, Bar, and Catering at 2712 Beaver Avenue. Call 279-2067. That's 279-2067.
It's time to think about upgrading the efficiency of your furnace and air conditioner. Leonard Tinker Heating and Cooling has provided honest, competent service for over 20 years. Whether it's your home or business, for repair work or to install a more energy-efficient furnace or air conditioner, call Leonard Tinker at 263-0422. That's 263-0422. For honest, competent heating and cooling service, call Leonard Tinker at 263-0422.
I love driving to Newton to see the races.
Me too, but I only have to drive across town.
You live in Newton?
Yep, Newton's got small town charm and it's close to Des Moines. I love the safe, friendly neighborhoods and family-owned businesses. And Newton's wind energy industry is really taking off.
How'd you find your home?
Dan Kelly with First Choice Realty. And Dan helped me find my office too.
Next time, instead of just speeding by, I'll stop in and check out Newton.
Why don't you check out Newton? Call Dan Kelly at 641-521-9260 or Dan Kelly at mchsi.com.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Welcome to the Fallon Forum, and thank you, Andy Fleming with Brother Trucker, for kicking off our conversation. Also want to thank the Sierra Club. That is the Iowa chapter of the Sierra Club. Also, Physicians for Social Responsibility for sponsoring the Fallon Forum, and also Gateway Market for sponsoring this segment of our conversation. We have a few issues to go over today. I want to talk about Governor Branstad's almost inexplicable rejection of the wisdom of increasing Medicaid funding and what effect that has on the poor. Of course, this is a political talk show. Of course, we've got to talk about Senator Harkin and his unexpected retirement announcement over the weekend. I've got a little bit of Donald Call to share with you. A letter to the editor that I think nailed it on the head. A nice conversation with Ron Yarnell about something that I'm finding a little mysterious. So mysterious, I'm having a hard time articulating what it is, but I guess we're calling it inverted totalitarianism. Inverted totalitarianism. Ron will make all things clear, all right? Yeah. So, but first, I got to tell you, I had a dream. I know. And this is not the Martin Luther King type of dream, although I do share that dream, of course. And I would love to see us get to the point where we celebrate his birthday not as a day of service, but as a day of justice, because it was about justice, not just about service. So anyway, that's not the kind of dream I'm talking about. I'm talking about one of those subconscious adventures, one of those nighttime cerebral outings that stick in your head. They're powerful. They stick in your head long after most dreams tend to fade from one's memory. So here's the dream. A couple nights ago, I'm living in a small town. It's a beautiful town. It's peaceful. There's a sense that there's justice everywhere. People are getting along. Maybe this is King's dream after all. But anyway, it's a small town. Beautiful, peaceful, in the middle of the forest and fields, and so integrated to the natural environment, you couldn't really tell where the town started and the beauty of nature began. It was very nice. And we woke up one morning. We, the townspeople, woke up to discover that government officials and a developer had sneakily used eminent domain. They'd used the power of condemnation to just tear out a whole bunch of trees. I don't know how we slept through that, but they tore out all these trees and then dumped a huge quantity of sand where those trees were. And we're like, in turmoil, what is going on? Well, we decided to improve this woodlot. We decided to make it into a beach. And then they realized that there was no water, neither ocean nor stream nor lake, and they realized they'd made a mistake. This is after they tore out all the trees and brought in huge quantities of sand. So they made up for that mistake by coming back the next day and improving it still further. This is how government works with eminent domain. They'll take your property to improve it for someone else's benefit, often some private interest. We'll talk about this more on Tuesday, but I just want to share my dream with you. And so they realized that their improvement of this site was environmentally and economically disastrous, ridiculous. They realized they'd screwed up, so they came back to fix it the next night. And their idea of fixing it was to stick huge, tall plastic palm trees, on the sand where real trees used to be, and create a boulevard down the middle, and add these various, tacky plastic tourist attractions. I don't even remember what they were. Tourist amenities of sorts. So, again, I had enough at that point. I woke up. I'd love to go back to sleep just to figure out how this thing ends, because the only way you prevent that sort of thing from happening is you fight it. You gotta get united. You gotta get organized. You gotta get focused, and you fight it, and you can win sometimes. Oftentimes, in some cases, in certain types of eminent domain, you can win against that combined force of corporate and government power. So it's a problem, though, when corporations and government get together in a lot of ways. Again, I don't want to say that the business community shouldn't work with government, but I do think it's important that there be this firewall between corporations and government. And when you don't have that firewall, then you eventually have fascism. And so John Mackey with Whole Foods and others who don't really understand fascism, go look that one up. But yeah, and that's the problem. In this case, corporations will convince their pals in government that, for example, they need to develop this lake if they're going to have economic development, or if they're going to have a water supply, if they're going to have the type of housing that they need. And so that often happens, but at the expense of the average person who has a smaller voice in government when you see this confluence of corporate and government power. So we'll talk more about that tomorrow, folks. I want to get some of the people who've been on the front lines of that issue involved with this conversation. Okay, so a couple other things. Donald Call, I know he's not one of some people's favorite writers. In fact, judging by the letters to the editor, he's the least favorite of some people. He's probably one of my favorites. So there, we know we see where we stand. But Call writes over the weekend. He's talking about imaginary playmates. This whole bizarre story of Monte Teo, the Notre Dame football player. I don't even want to go there, but He devotes most of the column to that conversation and then talks about Barack Obama being the imaginary playmate for a lot of folks in the Republican House. Their Obama, the House, the far right wing's Obama is this hardcore ideologue. Call calls him a borderline socialist, but of course we've also heard him called a communist, a fascist. And I've always fascinated that people can think of communism and fascism as synonymous or compatible. They also call him, weak on international affairs. He favors weakness as a strategy, in fact. Call says this kind of vague figure of murky background, perhaps even an enemy alien, yeah, we've heard that one, who stole the 2012 election from Mitt Romney. That's the imaginary playmate that Republicans have created out of Mitt Romney, which is a sharp contrast to the real Obama. Sorry, that's him, Romney? Obama. The sharp contrast to the real Obama. A Call calls him a mildly liberal centrist, maybe, who would love to find a Republican Party he could split the difference with. And Obama did try to do that extensively in term one, failure. And he doesn't seem to be as interested in doing that this term. And that's a good thing because that House Republicans aren't going to want to, they don't want his agenda to succeed, okay? And there's some parts that I don't want to succeed either, but I do appreciate it when there is civility and cooperation. So Call goes on to say, and as for weakness in foreign affairs, there are a lot of dead villains out there who would argue otherwise. Yeah, I mean, that to me is probably my biggest gripe with Obama is his approach to foreign policy, which is not that different than his predecessor, George W. Bush. Call goes on to say that Obama, it is said, does not reach out to Republicans. He doesn't have them over for drinks and dinner like Lyndon Johnson used to do. That's the problem, which ignores the fact that Republicans, both ideologically crazed and sane, live in fear that someone will take a picture of them standing next to Obama while looking friendly. And this is not imaginary. This has happened. I mean, where an elected official's picture with the president is used against that person. Crazy. You would think you'd want to be photographed with the president. Okay, so again, because they know it will be used against them in the next Republican primary. We might talk with Mitch McConnell about that, or at least someone who ran against Mitch McConnell about that later this week. So anyway, Call concludes by saying any real reform of our political system must await the destruction of the Republican Party at the ballot box. Perhaps that would lead to the rebirth of a reality-based party. Combine that with what Richard Doak is saying about the Republican Party needing a rebirth and perhaps again becoming the progressive party it once was. We may be seeing the beginnings of a very, very serious turnover in the partisan divide in this country. That will be interesting. All right. Every once in a while, there's a fantastic letter to the editor. There are lots of good letters to the editor. This one I thought was fantastic. He says, Thomas LaPointe writes, lawmakers can hold firm, too. With Governor Branstad holding firm on school reform before deciding the allowable growth in school spending, a perfect analog for the Iowa legislature is to hold fast and not enact any commercial property tax reform until all the hidden corporate tax loopholes in the form of taxation expenditures on existing tax credits and giveaways are closed. I like it. Governor Branstad saying, my way or the highway. We're going to do education reform my way. We're going to do my style education reform before we do allowable growth, even though it's in the law that we have to approve allowable growth by early February so schools can get their fiscal house in order for the fall semester. Even though that's the law, I'm going to put that aside and demand that the legislature, enact my reform proposal first. There's leadership and then there's bullying. That's the latter category. And LaPointe, again, great point here. LaPointe, good point. If the Iowa legislature wanted to play the same game, they'd say, well, they could play the same game, except it's legitimate in that case because there's no law requiring them to do tax reform by any date. But to say, before we do your commercial property tax relief, Governor Branstad, we're going to close those corporate loopholes, some of which only benefit big corporations that have, they have their major headquarters elsewhere in the country. Good letter. Thank you. Keep those cards and letters coming. So what about Governor Branstad? Well, I mentioned his take on the poor. We all know how bad he is when it comes to issues of poverty. We saw what he did with the appropriation for the food bank, vetoing a very relatively small appropriation for food bank, while allowing all sorts of other appropriations to stand, including one for a battleship. Battleships are more important than food for the poor, I guess, for the governor. I can tell you back in the day when I was on the Human Services Committee, there was a lot of effort made to beef up programs that were very, very targeted in terms of helping poor folks. And Governor Branstad was horrible on a lot of that stuff, including the Emergency Assistance Program, which was the last line of defense before a lot of poor folks ended up homeless. So again, good editorial on this subject recently in the paper. Governor Branstad's philosophy on health care, for example, if taken literally, means an epileptic can exercise his way out of the disease. Because the governor, again, he's pushing this big push for the healthiest state in the nation, and yet he doesn't want to expand Medicaid. I mean, Washington, and it's not like, what's the reason? Well, Washington, D.C., he's concerned that they don't have the ability to fund Medicaid going forward. That's just weak. It's not supported by facts. It's not supported by sound economics. And it's not consistent with what he has done and how he has governed in the past. For example, as the Register points out, Branstad expressed no such concerns when he wanted relief for farmers during a drought. He wasn't going to ask, well, is there enough money in the federal till? And if not, I'm just not going to help out Iowa's farmers. He didn't do that, But, for some reason, when it comes to stuff relevant to the poor, he just doesn't get it, which is remarkable to me. Maybe I shouldn't be surprised. I mean, the guy's lived a pretty sheltered life. 20 years as governor now, or about to be 20 years as governor. And he was the head of the Des Moines University. And you would think that he would understand the importance of making sure people had adequate health insurance as head of DMU. I guess not. Anyway, I don't design this as the let's beat up on Governor Branstad show, but I mean, so many opportunities and such a callous attitude towards so many constituency groups that just aren't able to play in politics the way his supporters do. And there is no poor lobby at the state capitol. Yeah, there are a few people who do represent issues important to low-income people, but it's not like the poor get together and use their food stamps to fund a lobbyist, which would be illegal anyhow, let me point out. But, so it just seems like Governor Branstad is totally incapable of understanding the issues relevant to poverty. Anyway, maybe that will change. I'm not holding my breath, and we're going to talk later about the Harkin thing, the shift that happens there. And part of the political fallout from Harkin's resignation is relevant to what happens with the governor's race, and specifically whether Terry Branstad decides to run again or not. That will be interesting, and we'll talk more about that later in the program. I do want to thank Gateway Market for sponsoring this segment of our show. Gateway is right off of ML King Parkway in the Sherman Hill neighborhood. It's a local grocery store owned by local folks, keeping their money in the community. Not just that, but they get a lot of their food from Iowa farms, local producers. And you shop there, folks. Your money's not going to be shipped to Austin, Texas, or some other faraway corporate headquarters. So check them out, folks, for groceries, but also for their wonderful cafe, breakfast, lunch, and supper. It's Gateway Market and Cafe at 20th and Woodland in the Sherman Hill neighborhood. We'll be back in a few minutes. Ron Yarnell is my guest up in the next segment. We're going to talk about inverted, I got it right this time, Ron, inverted totalitarianism.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Drug and alcohol addiction slowly steals a person's identity, tearing away pieces of their life little by little until one day it seems like the hope of a happy future is gone and there's no chance of getting it back. Here at St. Gregory Retreat Centers, we can assure you that there is hope. Our unique approach to recovery begins with the understanding that the dysfunction and damage caused by addiction can be overcome, not just dealt with. Don't let another day go by. Call St. Gregory today.
of a new era begins.
Well, good morning. This is the 7th of June in the Lord's year 2010, and this is day uno one of webcast1live.com. We will begin with Max World Live with my special guest, Tom Coates. In just a minute, there's Tom. Wait. Howdy. And we will be live for the very first time on Webcast One Live. Someday we're going to look back on this and say, gosh, remember that old day in history? Wonder where Walter Cronkite was. He must have been around hanging there too. But actually, it's the beginning of Webcast One Live. And thank you for listening. Thanks, Rob Spearman, and everybody who's put together this project together. And we're ready to go live now. So thanks for listening to MaxWorldLive.com.
I can't tell you that it's going real well from time to time, but it is going.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Folks, and I want to thank Community CPA and Associates for sponsoring this segment of our show. And I want to encourage folks to call and join the conversation. You're always welcome to be a part of this dialogue. 244-0077, 244-0077, or toll free, it's 855-244-0077. And folks, you can always, you can now, if you live in Story County or the neighboring counties, northern part of Polk County, you can get the Fallon Forum once a week on KHOI, that's K Heart of Iowa, 89.1 FM. That's on Wednesdays at 4 o'clock. It may also be rebroadcast. I'll have more information about that for you later. But happy to be back on the radio, at least part-time. So check it out, folks, at KHOI, K Heart of Iowa, on 89.1 FM. Yeah, again, tomorrow we're going to talk more about eminent domain, but we've also got some other issues to attend to. Passenger rail. Glenn Lyons with the Greater Des Moines Partnership is going to join us for a conversation about passenger rail and why that's important to Central Iowa and all of Iowa. But with me in the studio now is the Divine Master of Mischief. I just made that up because you know what? I don't know what inverted totalitarianism is, but it sounded intriguing enough to invite you to come join me and talk about it. Ron Yarnell, folks. Ron, what is up and what is this inverted totalitarianism of which you speak?
Well, Chris Hedges, the journalist and commentator on public affairs, has been talking about it a great deal in the last couple of years. And he refers people to a political philosopher by the name of Sheldon Woolen, who originated the term. And basically, inverted totalitarianism is a way that Hedges and Woolen and some others see our society drifting in terms of power relationships, in terms of politics, in terms of who runs things. And to understand inverted totalitarianism, we just have to go to classical totalitarianism. We go to the 20th century, and we go to the classical totalitarian states, both of the extreme right and of the extreme left.
Okay, so we've got Cuba. I suppose you're going to give me as an example on the extreme left.
Sure.
And we've got plenty of examples on the extreme right. Italy.
Right.
Japan,
well, we have the fascist,
Soviet Union,
the fascist and the communist regimes.
Okay.
And
I guess Soviet Union would be on the political left.
Right, and basically they were all rather noteworthy in that you had certain common elements. You had, for example, a charismatic figure run things. You had a Mussolini, you had a Hitler, you had a Stalin. You had a figure that Mao Zedong. You had a figure that people rallied around, and also you had a high degree of mobilization. You had parades, you had rallies, you had people in the streets.
Well, and you had people you could hate.
Well, before let me.
Okay, I'm ahead of you there. Okay.
You basically you mobilize the majority of the society towards your political agenda, and some examples of that, for example, the Cultural Revolution in China, where there was a high degree of mobilization, particularly among young people. Certainly anyone who's ever seen the Lina Riefenstahl movie, the classic movie Triumph of the Will, which was a film of a 1930s Nuremberg rally, that kind of is our idea of totalitarianism. And Woolen argues that what we have today is the exact opposite of that. It's a totalitarianism, it's a control, it's a lording over by certain powers, but its agenda is not to mobilize. Its agenda is to radically demobilize people.
To render them apathetic and uninterested in challenging
render them
authority?
apathetic, render them alienated, disaffected by the political system, convince them that they're better off staying home, convince them that nothing would be a greater waste of their time, for example, than getting involved in political parties. Leave that to the professionals, so to speak.
So you're saying the goal of totalitarianism, I mean, by the evil ones, is the same, but the strategy to accomplish it is the opposite. Instead of mobilizing people to buy into, for example, the Aryan race,
right?
You mobilize them, you demobilize them, you make them so uninterested in the process that they basically let you do what you want.
Yes, and you brought up an example in your comments. For example, classical totalitarianism, there's always the ideal. There is the master race. There is the classless society. There are these goals that people are being mobilized to move forward. And in inverted totalitarianism, there's none of that. There's basically go shopping. There's or you're or you're diverted into things. For example, okay, I have to admit I will be watching the Super Bowl, but the hoopla surrounding the Super Bowl is just made for inverted totalitarianism. It's focusing people on an event that people take sides, people have opinions, people have investments, but there's no politics behind it.
I agree. The Super Bowl really doesn't matter now. The New England Patriots nor the Green Bay Packers are in it.
And it's even to the point, and I think that sports, and I'm a sports fan, okay, but even the interesting thing about where sports has gotten today, people even go to games now uniformed. Far more than when I was a kid. You went with your street clothes when you went to see a baseball game or a football game. Now you look at stadiums, and most people are dressed in the uniforms of their teams. But that's
a separate, a successful merchandising endeavor.
And that's a part of inverted totalitarianism.
So
that's investing people's energies and time and into merchandising, into commercial outlets, and basically convincing them, you know what, politics won't do you any good.
And you're saying partly that we're being distracted through things like professional sports and shopping.
Mm-hmm.
But let me add, do you think inverted totalitarianism is entirely a new thing?
No, it's actually been growing, I think, and other people may have other opinions, and that's fine, since what's called the Powell Memorandum.
That's new.
Okay.
I mean, I'm thinking. I mean, isn't Rome an example of something similar, where the populace was just so focused on hedonism, on just kind of a careless attitude toward
it may be
Senate?
especially as the shift came from the Republic to the Empire. When Julius Caesar crossed the Rubicon, that may have been the great moment of the new order. And then you had all these people that you really didn't need, and then over the course of time, you didn't even need them for the army. Okay, then you had increasingly in the Roman Empire, for example, you had foreigners fill the ranks of the army.
And here we do a combination of fairly new arrivals to this country and the poor. They make for great foot soldiers.
Voluntary military service is a great way to do interesting things from the perspective of totalitarianism.
So you would concede that there are examples in history of what you call inverted totalitarianism?
I think no, because inverted totalitarianism, most directly has to do with the rise of the corporate state. That corporations really, I know, I don't know if Frank's listening. Frank, today, if you call in, I'm good with that because I'd like to hear your views on this.
No, Ron said that. Okay, not me.
Okay.
Frank, I'm not encouraging you to call in today.
But the thing is that he was trying to figure out the issue of fascism. How can fascism be something involved in capitalism, involved in a free market? Well, if you study the history of fascism, the rise of fascism, read up, research the involvement of prominent industrialists, prominent financiers behind the Nazi movement, behind the fascist movement. And they wanted to put forces into power that would basically control everyone. And their goal was basically cheap and docile labor. Yeah. Now, I think what can probably be argued is they miscalculated, and a figure, for example, like Hitler, turned the tables on his backers. Because I don't think his backers really wanted to get bombed back into the Stone Age by 1944, 45, and it happened. But today, the corporate state is basically direct corporate rule. When government,
well, it's right now. It's subtle corporate rule.
Not less and less subtle all the time.
Yes, I agree, but it's still.
I mean, when we think about, for example, how much of our armed forces has been privatized, how much of our
prison system
is a great example. The interesting thing about
to privatize education too. Here in Iowa, 500 students are going to an online school run by a private corporation.
And an accessory to this, one thing that has in common with classical totalitarianism is the use of propaganda. The use of media. And media, as we know, we've talked about this before on this show, is controlled by a few major corporations, and they have been very diligent in keeping the political conversation excruciatingly narrow, where certain ideas are just considered too extreme or not valid, or just we don't want. And you use terms also increasingly that don't have any meaning anymore, like liberal, conservative, moderate. I mean, what's a moderate? Can you even
moderate to some people, or to maybe people who are trying to frame the debate, means someone who lies in between the extremes. But
what extremes?
Exactly, what extremes? And the extremes keep shifting too as the radical right has become more and more prominent in its influence in this country. That what's called a moderate shifts. I mean, I don't know if you would ever have called Robert Ray a moderate 20, 30 years ago. But right now, he's to the left of what a lot of people would call moderate, given how far the right wing of the Republican Party has been able to move.
But before we go into a beat up on the Republican fest, I need to tell you, Democrats are no less involved, no less
I agree.
Culpable, and because they basically go along with the flow. They play their role in putting up a liberal facade. But ultimately, the what you might call, it's not even a political discussion, right versus left, Democrat versus Republican. If it offends the corporate state, it doesn't get really talked about. And meanwhile, the corporate state gets what it wants. I mean, I think that I don't know what you're going to talk about when you're going to talk about eminent domain. But I think eminent domain, as it's used, for example, increasingly the confiscation of private property, is part of this whole process, that when you have the confusion of the private interest and the public interest and how that works out.
Right. Folks, if you'd like to join the conversation, Ron Yarnell is my guest this segment of the program. We're talking about inverted totalitarianism. We're talking about the role of government in our lives broadly. Later in the program, we're going to be talking about Senator Harkin's retirement and the shockwaves that has sent across politics on both sides of the aisle in Iowa and nationally. Number to call 244-0077 or toll free 855-244-0077. And if you are shy or afraid of Ron, who really is a terrible person,
I am.
You can email me at fallonforum@gmail.com.
I take pride in being
fallonforum@gmail. You are not a terrible person. I was just teasing you.
But you hit the truth.
I hit the truth? You're a terrible person?
I'm a terrible person.
Okay. Well, good. Congratulations. Well, you've got, I think I commend you for taking so much time to study history and to formulate opinions that are provocative and I think hard to refute. They're opinions that are well-founded in reality.
Well, I'm going to put it like this, Ed. Isn't it interesting how people, they engage in the political process and how easily, no matter whether they come from a conservative perspective or a liberal perspective, and they never, ever anymore get what they want. They become disaffected, they become angry, they become alienated, and that's part of this process of inverted totalitarianism. The point is to demobilize people. So, yeah, that's supposed to be your permanent state of being. You're supposed to be disaffected.
Well, what percentage of the American electorate, potential electorate, don't vote? It's roughly 50%.
It's true. And also, when you reduce the political act to voting, when voting is what is supposed to be your moment of political activity, you know what? It's not. Actually, voting is a very minimal part of political activity.
It's an important part, but it is minimal. I give you that. It's just one small element.
You're basically voting for candidates. Even as Iowans, we can be happy with our caucus system and First in the Nation. But even before candidates get to us, they're very carefully vetted by interests and power organizations that we have no say in.
Well, and I found that out when I challenged the establishment. You know, it's not an easy thing to do, and you will get both barrels will come at you.
And I will say this, for example, I'm amazed at how many liberals, for example, are saying to themselves, now that President Obama has been reelected, he doesn't have to worry about reelection ever again. The politics will be now the real progressive liberal Obama can come out, and I'm thinking to myself, don't hold your breath.
Well, let me ask you. I mean, I'm not sure I was saying that, but I was hoping that, and I will say from election day till now, it's been a little more encouraging. There's serious talk about some decent immigration reform. The president's proposal on guns is more than just we should talk, and they're actually proposing something specific. I understand how the foreign policy continues in the wrong direction, but and some of the appointments recently have been disappointing. But overall, it's better start than it was. This start is better than the first term. Would you agree with that?
When something actually gets accomplished, we'll talk. Right now, it's just talk. It's just like the Healthcare Reform Act, where it began with, hey, let's have universal health care. And then it became, hey, let's have a public option. And then it became, let's give a lot of money to insurance companies.
Well, that's what we've done. This health insurance bill, healthcare bill, the Affordable Care Act, again, it does some small things, I believe. But it's a bill that the insurance industry, if they didn't write it, they could have.
And you know what? It's no different than Medicare Part D, which was aid to dependent pharmaceutical companies.
So let me ask you this. If the media is so, and you're saying that the media is absolutely a part of this inverted totalitarianism, this effort to keep the populace disenfranchised, disappointed, uninvolved, you're saying the media is definitely a part of that.
The big corporate media, which controls what 90% of what people take in, yeah.
Well, and that, again, I hope and I believe that may be changing as internet becomes a more important and more powerful source of information for people.
Well, to me, a perfect example of media control, and I suppose people on the right will might be irked at this. At your former place, where they now have from morning to midnight solid, what you might call right-wing political talk radio.
Before it was 20 hours as opposed to 24. There were only
and
4 hours.
And I'm fascinated. There are people who listen all day long, and they believe themselves to be politically active and politically informed, and yet when any kind of objective research is done, the people who are most heavily involved in talk radio, the people who are most heavily involved watching Fox, they're the least informed part of the electorate. And how does that happen? Well, because that's the point. That's the agenda.
Yeah. The more you watch, the less you know.
Right.
Yeah. But why did the corporate media so extensively and at least initially favorably cover the Occupy movement?
Did they? I mean,
I think originally it was favorable.
I think it was an event that happened, and when you're the media, you're like, here's something we need to film. But, in protest movements for years now, what I've been interested in is how there's no real, on the audio-visual media, there's no real attempt to really talk to people and have them explain why they're there, what are their issues. Sometimes I think this hit the real nadir during the Iraq War when anti-war protesters were basically dismissed with, here's a picture of anti-war protesters, and let's move on.
Well, let me offer this. Maybe one reason the Occupy movement was built up initially in the corporate media was so that it would be a more dramatic fall once the corporate media decided to tear it down.
I don't know if they think that long term in that kind of way.
Not that long term, a couple of months, weeks maybe.
It was a news item. It was something that was happening. Therefore, it was a commodity. And so it made the blip. But no one to this day, we could walk outside and into the skywalk, and let's ask people, what was the Occupy movement about? And I'm betting you'll get a variety of answers, none of them even close to what it was about.
Yep. Hey, Ron Yarnell, folks, my guest here this segment of the program. Thanks so much for joining us. And this segment sponsored by Community CPA and Associates. This is an accounting firm at 3816 Ingersoll Ave. Right on the Ingersoll Strip in Des Moines, and it's been my accounting firm for years. Yingsa is the founder and director, and she does a fantastic job. So much so that they've grown to well over 2,000 customers now. They are committed to providing professional accounting and tax services to all their clients, regardless of cultural background, economic status. They do a fantastic job, folks. Give them a shout. Thank them for supporting the Fallon Forum. And you can find them at 288-3188, 288-3188. That's Community CPA and Associates on Ingersoll Ave in Des Moines. I'll be back in a minute.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Hey folks, it's Ed Fallon. I want to tell you about saving energy and saving money. Tim Reynolds with Reynolds Energy Solutions will give you a comprehensive energy audit that will cost you nothing. And Tim will identify the many ways in which you can reduce energy use while saving money. Now, I had Tim over for an audit last month, and I was amazed, I tell you, at how much energy was going through the roof, out the windows, the back door. You get it. So before the cold winds of winter really blow hard, give Tim a call at 802-2801. That's 802-2801.
I'm a burrito.
I'm a fighting burrito, full of fresh ingredients prepared before your very eyes.
I don't have eyes.
I have over 28 options and 268 million combinations, including Rizzo for vegetarians.
I can take my meat off and call myself vegetarian.
Put that back on. The Fighting Burrito is locally owned.
I'm owned by some big corporation somewhere. Say, you want to go on a date?
No thanks. I'm seeing a quesadilla.
The Fighting Burrito online, fightingburrito.com. Join the fight.
Since 1994, Sid's Catering has graced Des Moines area events with quality service and rave reviews. Owner Sid Cohn's culinary career began with a Northeast Iowa vacation home for international clientele. Sid earned a Bachelor of Science in Hotel Restaurant Management and was the assistant clubhouse manager at Des Moines Golf and Country Club. Sid has a passion for fresh, local products and offers a wide range of options, including vegan, gluten-free, and ethnic. Mention the Fallon Forum when you book your breakfast or lunch event and get 10% off. Contact Sid's Catering at 208-2091. That's Sid's Catering at 208-2091. On March 28th, Equal Justice After Hours is Iowa Legal Aid's annual fundraiser that helps provide access to justice for low-income Iowans. The event includes a reception and program at the Temple for the Performing Arts in Des Moines. It also includes remarks by Georgetown University law professor Peter Edelman and the induction of Robert Oberbillig into the Iowa Legal Aid Hall of Fame. Tickets start at $50 and sponsorship opportunities are available. Contact Terry Bennett at tbennett@iowalaw.org. That's tbennett@iowalaw.org.
Nestled in the heart of downtown, Ritual Cafe is one of Des Moines' most unique places, offering a wide variety of coffee and tea. Ritual Cafe also serves the only all-vegetarian menu in town. And Ritual Cafe is a cultural hub for artists and musicians, with a performance stage hosting local, national, and international talent. Make Ritual Cafe a part of your daily ritual. On 13th Street between Locust and Grand in downtown Des Moines. And check out ritualcafe.com.
Community CPA is the 15th largest CPA firm in Iowa, providing audit, tax, and accounting services. Community CPA specializes in international tax treaty and double taxation avoidance among countries and states. 9 dedicated, experienced, hardworking staff are the company's foundation, and their compassion towards every client is the secret behind Community CPA's success. At Community CPA, you can expect quality service year-round. Call 288-3188. Community CPA, 3816 Ingersoll. Experience the difference.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
That is Max Wellman, folks. A funny Valentine. Max, of course, fantastic local talent, and he's got a couple shows coming up on February 14th at the 4th Street Theater. Max Wellman Music. Go online. Max Wellman Music. Get some tickets to that before it gets sold out. I want to thank Tinker Heating and Cooling for sponsoring this segment of our show, and we're going to talk a little bit about Senator Harkin here, which of course is the big shocker of in the news department this weekend. I don't think a lot of people saw that coming. You know what? It really didn't. It didn't make sense given all the overtures that he's been making. I mean, he's got a fundraiser coming up with Lady Gaga. I mean, gosh, if I had a fundraiser happening with Lady Gaga, I would postpone my retirement announcement until after that fundraiser, just so I could hang out with Lady Gaga for a night. I mean, maybe that's because that's the way I was born. But anyway, it's surprising how quickly it happened. With that event coming up, he's already got $3 million in his senatorial account. I believe that's more than nearly any other senator in the U.S. Senate in terms of an election campaign. It really is kind of astounding. Okay, so my first thought is, well, maybe Harkin's sick. Maybe something bad's going on here, and he was just diagnosed with some horrible disease, and he's just going to announce that he's done, but not really tell us anything more. And I don't think the public has any need or right to dig into somebody's personal trauma if that's the case. But then you go on to read more about what's going on. I mean, he says, quote, I looked at Ruth, his wife, and he said, I think it's time. And she said, yes, let's get it over with. And I said, okay, that's what we're doing. And that's kind of that's almost remarkable, actually. It's not like the politicians who say, well, I need to spend more time with my family, which is, I've always thought that was just an excuse for not telling us what you really believed. Now, Harkin goes on to say he wants to take dance lessons. There are certain things that he wants to do, he and Ruth want to do before they get too old to do it. I mean, he's 73. He's a pretty healthy 73. She's pretty healthy. So, yeah, maybe that's it. He said health is not an issue, and I guess we got to believe him. But it is kind of remarkable in terms of how these things work, because when you, especially in a state like Iowa, I mean, we are as purple as they come when it comes to these kind of races. Again, look at who we got in the Senate, Harkin, who is very much a what we call liberal Democrat, although I think the word liberal, who knows what that means anymore. And you got Grassley way out on the other side. And yet Iowans continued to elect them both by significant margins, especially Grassley. But Harkin, again, he's beaten what, 4 U.S. congressmen? It's a pretty impressive record. And sometimes it's fairly close, but never a squeaker, never a nail biter. He always has by modern standards, a comfortable victory. And so when that happens, when you lose somebody like that, when you're the majority leader of the Senate, or when you're the head of the DNC, or when you're the president for that matter, and you want to maintain, your Democratic advantage in the Senate, you're going to work really, really hard to discourage anybody like Harkin from retiring. Wait, you want to retire because you want to enjoy the last few years of your life while you're still healthy? You selfish SOB. I mean, I can hear some of the arguments being made. How dare you sacrifice the well-being of the country so you can go off and enjoy life? I can hear that. I can hear those arguments. I mean, I know in the legislature even, which is again a lot smaller stakes in the Iowa legislature, there were incumbents pressured to stay in office because their seat was needed in the Democratic column, and I'm sure the same conversations are had on the Republican side. So I can't imagine that Harkin didn't get some activity in that direction, some pressure, but maybe he announced this so quickly, so quietly, that the establishment didn't have time to lean on him to change his mind. That's a theory that I think may have some legs. But again, all this is kind of just inside baseball, reflecting on what happened and why. The bottom line is our junior senator, and it is remarkable that Harkin is our junior senator. Again, Harkin and Grassley, between the two of them, more years in the U.S. Senate than any other Senate delegation in the country. It's astounding. But it is remarkable, again, that he is retiring. But moving beyond that, I'm going to take him at his word. His health's fine. He just had a conversation with Ruth, and they decided, hey, let's do it. And it happened. But it has tremendous impact on the political reality here in Iowa. I mean, I've already had 5 or 6 people encourage me to run, and I'll be really, really clear about that. Not going to happen, okay? I don't have a death wish. I've already tried. I've never believed in running just to make a statement. There are much better ways of making a statement, like a letter to the editor. Running for office, you don't play around with that unless you really want to win, in my opinion. Again, there are folks who disagree, but that's my take. And there's not a chance in hell I would win a race for the U.S. Senate. And I do hope that Democrats are able to nominate a progressive. And I'm happy to hear that Bruce Braley is one of the candidates given most attention in terms of who might run on the Democratic side. I am a fan of Braley. I think he's done a good job. I think he has the right values and fights for the right issues. I mean, yeah, there's always going to be some disagreement. Again, there's no such thing as a perfect. I love the word perfect when it comes to a politician. Well, that politician's not perfect. And if you're really honest about what you mean by perfect, perfect means, well, that politician doesn't think exactly like me. He doesn't vote exactly like I would vote every time. He's not perfect like me. That's really what we mean when we say perfect. And so, yeah, Bruce Braley is not perfect, meaning he doesn't think exactly like me, but he's good. He's been a good fighter. The truth is, if we're really honest about things, a perfect candidate, a perfect politician is probably somebody who's a lot better than us in certain areas. I mean, I know what some of my weak areas are, and Braley has strengths in some of those areas, and I have a hard time seeing this be a competitive field if Braley runs. I think there's a possibility that he would have at least one or more challenger in a primary. I think his candidacy, though, especially if he announces pretty early here, it would limit the field of challengers on the Democratic side, and that's okay. If he doesn't run, who knows what might happen. Who knows what might happen? I mean, again, the names being kicked around in the press. You've got who? Well, Tom Vilsack, but again, I doubt that. I think he's having way too much fun as head of the USDA. Christy Vilsack, you don't come off a loss by more than people expected you to lose by, or even in some cases. I mean, some of us expected she might win against Steve King. You don't come off that loss and take on a seat that's 4 times as big. You don't do that. I don't see Christy Vilsack running. Chet Culver, possibly, for 3 reasons. One, Chet Culver has always wanted to be a U.S. Senator, just like his daddy. And the problem is he's very, very different than his dad. And I don't see him. I don't think Chet Culver has regained the public confidence and support that he would need to have a chance, even against Braley. Again, you could argue, well, the guy's he's run statewide 3 times and won. 3 out of 4 times and won. But I don't see it happening. I mean, he is making noise. He's putting together a committee. We've been thinking that he may run for governor again. Again, I think that would be a really bad idea. I think Chet Culver running for anything right now would be a really bad idea for him. And for other reasons, I don't think it's a good idea. But he may not be he may not be tracking stuff close enough, detailed enough, with enough, acumen to see that it's not a good idea for him to run for U.S. Senate. So we'll see. Again, I think the range of possibilities on the Democratic side, much smaller potential field than on the Republican side. On the Republican side, what do we got? Well, of course, Tom Latham is the possibility. I'm having a hard time seeing that, though. If Tom Latham runs for U.S. Senate, he gives up his House seat. And he just won this, the brand new House seat. He just won this in a very contested, a very negative race against Leonard Boswell. I mean, he won by a pretty good margin, but again, a lot of baggage, a lot of negative stuff, a lot of residual, baggage from the attack ads. And so I'm having a hard time seeing Latham run. I know King is also mentioned, and King himself has even expressed interest. I'm having a hard time seeing that because Steve King, though he is horrible on most issues, in my opinion, is no dummy, and he's got to know that just because he can win Western Iowa doesn't mean he has a chance in heck of winning the state. And I think he has no chance of winning a statewide race. Of course, Bob Vanderplaats is also mentioned as a candidate. He's already run 3 times for governor. Well, why not try a 4th time, Bob? I'm all for that. Let me just say I'm very, 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 very much for. I very much supported Bob Vanderplaats running for the U.S. Senate because it would be good comedy, and he would lose badly. So, and he would probably even lose in his own primary. I can't imagine he would pull that off. But for a party that continues to try to move away from, well, there are elements within the Republican Party that continue to try to remove away from the most extreme voices. Bob represents that extreme voice. And so it would be interesting and maybe even helpful for the conversation. I'm not just saying it to be good comedy. It might also be a good conversation for Republicans to have and for the rest of us to kind of be a part of in terms of seeing how it plays out. So, yes, Bob, please run. Oh, and Steve King, yes, please run as well. Actually, everybody run on the Republican side. That will open up so many possibilities. Gosh. So, yeah, if Latham runs, you got a 3rd congressional district open, King, a 4th seat open. And if Kim Reynolds runs, well, that means she won't be running for governor in 2014. It could be interesting. State Senator Brad Zahn is mentioned. I am having a really, really hard time seeing that happen. I would bet money against that myself. Matt Whitaker says he may run. Again, I'm having a hard time seeing that. Matt Whitaker, of course, is kind of like Bob Vanderplaats, just a little shorter. Matt Strawn is also mentioned, as is Bill Northey and Bill Dix. Now, Bill Dix might be a possibility because the guy has tremendous ambition. Again, he's a lot like Bob Vanderplaats on the issues, and maybe even more vicious in some ways. But I don't, I'd have to look and see when he's up for re-election. I don't think he'd want to lose his Senate seat, his seat in the Iowa Senate. But if he could retain that seat and run, I would see that could be a real possibility. Anyway, there are other possibilities on the Republican side. Bob Burnell is mentioned. And again, Bob's problem is he's a moderate Republican. He's more like a Bob Ray Republican. And seeing a Bob Ray-like Republican do well in a Republican primary, again, it'd be a great conversation. If you can get a couple of crazies out there, Vanderplaats and a couple other extremists, maybe a candidate like Burnell might do well in a Republican primary. But we'll see. We shall see. I mean, it's all speculation at this point, folks. Again, if either one or both of Iowa's Republican congressmen decide to run, or Kim Reynolds decides to run, it starts. There's more things happening domino-wise that could get interesting. But I talk about this a little because it's breaking news, and it's probably something we need to talk a little bit about, but I'm not going to spend too much time on it. Again, I want to congratulate Senator Harkin on a long history of fighting good fights. I mean, I've campaigned for Harkin on many occasions. I've disagreed with him on many occasions, but in the end, I feel he has done a great job. I wish we had more like him in the U.S. Senate. And again, he's not, quote, perfect, but he's done a good job. And my hat is off to him, Senator Harkin. Good luck with retirement. And I'm going to take you at your word that you and Ruth just thought about it and said, hey, let's move on. And again, I do commend you for announcing early enough for there to be a primary, because I've seen it happen in the Iowa legislature where leadership will, get somebody to retire, but not announce to the very, very last minute, have a handpicked candidate ready to go, and give nobody else a chance to enter that race. And I'll just say it, folks. What comes to mind is this: the House leadership, Democratic House leadership, knowing Wayne Ford was going to retire a few years ago, not saying anything until the very last moment, and already having selected Ruth Ann Gaines to succeed him. I mean, they're all in on that, and that's wrong. That's just totally wrong. It's not fair to your constituents or to other prospective candidates. So again, Senator Harkin, on so many levels, you've served with integrity, and you retired with integrity, and it is appreciated. So we'll see how that shakes out, folks. I got plenty more to talk about this week. We got a lot of diversity in our schedule. We've got tomorrow, of course, we're going to talk about eminent domain. We're also going to talk with Glenn Lyons with the Greater Des Moines Partnership about passenger rail. Wednesday, we'll talk about why more and more banks are merging. We'll also talk with Carlos Jane with Iowans for Gun Safety about New York City's gun ordinance, among other things. And we'll talk about the recent student sit-in at a school in Columbus Junction in protest of cuts to teacher pay. Thursday, Ralph Rosenberg with the Iowa Environmental Council with us to talk water quality. And as we always have on Thursday, State Representative Dan Kelly. And we'll also talk on Thursday about Marriott hotels. Marriott International's decision to phase out serving confinement bred chickens and hogs raised in confinement. And that could be very interesting in terms of the impact it has beyond Marriott's decision. Friday, we're going to discuss lake restoration. Governor Branstad pulling the plug on Iowa's public lakes. There aren't many of them, and there's been a commitment to do something about it. It seems to be changing. We'll also talk with Maureen McHugh with Physicians for Social Responsibility about coal, some changes on that front, and then Heather Ryan, who ran against Mitch McConnell when she lived in Kentucky in the general election. McConnell, of course, getting threats from the right that he's not crazy enough and they might challenge him in the primary. We'll talk with Heather about that. So, folks, stick around for those conversations this week. Stay tuned for Bradshaw. I want to thank Webcast One Live for providing the studio for the show. I want to thank my assistant, Maddie Arrington. And I want to thank Leonard Tinker Heating and Cooling for sponsoring this segment of our show. If you need furnace work, folks, give Tinker a shout at 263-0422. 263-0422. Thank him for supporting this progressive alternative to right-wing radio. And again, he's got 32 years of experience under his belt, so not only thanking him will be a good idea, but from your point of view, from your furnace's point of view, it'll be a good idea because they'll do a fantastic job. Again, that's Tinker Heating and Cooling, 263-0422. Stick around, folks, for Bradshaw.
I'm Brian Leach, owner and general manager of Service Legends. I brought along a couple of the home comfort heroes.
Hi, I'm Tammy Wells.
I am Nick Wondershide.
I am administrative manager.
I am the senior technician.
From Service Legends.
It seems like every good thing, when you feel it to the bone that it's good, there's a lot of hard work put behind it. I don't think that you can fake it and have it turn out good.
You know, if we seem like, okay, that's just weird, it's just a furnace, why would you believe so deeply in a furnace? It's not just that, you know, we want to show the world that you can have good service.
Yeah, I mean, it's your home.
You know, it's built into our daily trainings, it's built into our culture, that we're gonna do whatever it takes to have each client say they love us, period.
That's why we spend all the hours in the training that we do. And if we guarantee it's gonna be a good experience for you, or else it's free, what type of work do you think we're gonna do?
There is a guarantee.
Temperature selection guarantee, fixed right or it's free guarantee, comfort guarantee, best value guarantee. All of these guarantees hold us accountable to ensuring that we exceed your expectations. And if for whatever reason we'd fail and we can't make it right, we guarantee all of those guarantees with a 100% money back guarantee.
I mean, if you don't think that your technician can fix it right, are you gonna say that to a client? No.
You don't have to worry about having a technician come to your house.
We drug test, background check all of our team members. We put safe people in your home. Each and every one of our service techs, 400 hours a year in training.
You tell it the minute they walk in the door. They know what they're doing, they've done their homework, and they actually truly care about what you want.
Because at the end of the day, you're the person that makes sure I have a job.
They're gonna be listening. They're gonna wanna know what your challenges are. Then they're gonna come and give you options, and you get to choose.
If I'm there to help and I make it easy and painless, I did my job right that day.
Well, when it comes to your comfort, safety, and your family, you know, you don't necessarily go buy the most expensive, but you get the most bang for your buck.
Oh, it's worth it because there's a lot of people that will find a way to get it to work right now and then leave and then come back, charge you again, and the cycle just repeats itself. So when I'm out there looking at the furnace, I want to find why it failed today. How can we change the part today with something that you're not going to have to worry about? Is it worth changing the part today? I mean, you can put a lot of money into a furnace. I can fix parts all day. There's good job security in that for me, but is it the right thing for you?
I get a lot of the phone calls of after the technicians are there. They're just in awe. They're like, wow, you guys are great. I mean, I don't even know what to say. You guys are great. Everything you did was perfect. It was great.
Keep going though, I like this.
Just give us a try. I'm gonna take all the risk.
I've got the time to make this right. I've got the support to make it right.
Just check us out.
And if you don't see the value in what we do,
I mean, fixed right or it's free or 100% money back.
enough said.